People had greatness fatigue with the Chiefs, just like they did with the Patriots back in the day. Did the Eagles save the NFL for a second time by dethroning a dynasty? Let's talk about it here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I didn't hear one lie told. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. Here on Locked On NFL, we got a double dose of the NFL action with the use of local experts from around the National Football League. And we got an expert here on Tuesday that we always have, my man Kevin Ostrich from Locked On Ravens. Make sure wherever you get your podcast, you check in at that location each and every day for Locked On NFL. We will be there, whether it's the podcast you watch or you hear or a combination of both. Make sure you tap in each and every day to make sure you don't miss an episode. Shout out to the everydayers. And if you're not one, you can be, but I hope you enjoy it while you're here having a little pit stop with us today. All right, here's what we're going to get to. By the end of the show, we're going to talk about contenders that need to eat their vegetables. And what I mean by that is you got to get a little bit better and a little bit stronger. We'll talk about the two teams that were in the conference championship games that lost, and then two teams that I think probably should have been in the conference championship game and would have probably given the Eagles a better game or the Chiefs a better game in those championship games. What's next for the Chiefs? A lot of people are predicting this to be their downfall. I don't think that's this year. Andy Reid did say he's going to coach at least one more year. I think whatever you think the downfall is will come after that. But first, we're going to give a lot of love to the Eagles. Did the Eagles save the NFL? I don't mean save the NFL in the literal standpoint, more figuratively, because people were just absolutely tired of the Chiefs and they thought the Chiefs always got the benefit of everything. I bring in Kevin Ostrich, who's been on the other end as a Ravens, I wouldn't say fan, but someone who follows the Ravens and covers the Ravens every single day. You've been on the other end of the Chiefs. Did the Eagles save the NFL, Kevin, in your opinion?
I think they did, in a sense of we went directly from the Tom Brady Patriots to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, and there wasn't really a break of parity where it's, we've had a couple times here and there. I mean, the Ravens are one of those teams who beat the Brady-led Patriots and went to the Super Bowl and won it. But you just see Brady go to the Super Bowl, then Mahomes go. And this three-peat that everybody was talking about for Kansas City, if they won 3 straight, this, that, and the other, I think, Wig, this was the biggest swing in result that we could have possibly seen, especially the way that the game went for Kansas City. Because, if the Chiefs win this game, and whether it really didn't matter how the Chiefs won, if it was dominant fashion, if it was close, we're talking about that team as, the greatest dynasty maybe of all time. No team has ever won 3 Super Bowls. Everybody was ready to give Patrick Mahomes the GOAT crown and take that away from Brady. But the way that this game went, the way that Mahomes looked rattled, the way that Philadelphia's defense just swarmed around that Chiefs offensive line, and the way that the Chiefs didn't even look like a playoff team in that game. I think now people are talking about what you just talked about of like, well, was this the downfall? Was this the changing of the guard? Now, I'm not going that far yet because I still think a team in the AFC has to prove they can beat Kansas City before we go that far.
Yeah.
But this was like from what we could have been talking about Kansas City as versus what we're talking about them as now. Right. It is a monumental shift in narrative, in how we look at this team moving forward.
Especially because they got smacked around. And one of the people responsible for that was Howie Roseman. They lost to the Kansas City Chiefs a few years back on a day that they probably thought they outplayed them. Listen to Lou DiBiase. You're going to hear Lou twice in this clip, in this segment, because that's my ode to the Eagles and what they actually accomplished. I'm going to let him peacock a little bit, but listen to him how he talks about Howie Roseman.
Howie Roseman learned from his mistakes. He said, I'm going to draft defensive backs early in the draft. I'm going to finally invest in great schools. I'm just going to keep it simple. For all of Howie's creativity, I think one of the best things he did in creating a championship team was keep it simple, stupid. I'm going to take the best players from the best schools. I'm going to take Nolan Smith from Georgia, Jalen Carter from Georgia, Jordan Davis from Georgia, Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts from Alabama. Right? I mean, he just took players from incredible schools, and you saw that talent up front today.
He did what a lot of people do, and that is look at body of work. Mike Tomlin did that, and Baltimore has done that forever. They've looked at body of work when it comes to drafting guys early. Kudos to Howie Roseman for putting them all together. They were calling them the Georgia Eagles or the Philadelphia Bulldogs. Well, guess what? It worked.
Yeah, it did. And you're right. The Ravens, it was obviously Ozzie Newsome had the Alabama connection. And so the Ravens were at Alabama school for a while. You mentioned a couple other teams that do it as well. Sometimes it is just like, look, these guys play at the highest level of college football. They play in high leverage playoff national championship atmospheres. And for a team in Philadelphia, they continue to want to add win now pieces. There are always small school guys that have their day as rookies, as second year guys. But it's almost like the low hanging fruit. It's just take one of those SEC guys, take one of those Big Ten guys, or multiple of them, and that will be how you end up getting to a Super Bowl. We've seen a bunch of teams take different blueprints, but Philly's blueprint to me was to continue to build, and they continue to go back to that well over and over again. And those Georgia defenses were top college defenses, like incredible units. And so when a Jalen Carter falls to you, or you're able to pair him with a Jordan Davis and have that interior, or Nolan Smith, who you took a chance on, like it just makes sense. And plus, I think an underrated part, Wig, and I'm sure people are talking about it, but these guys have familiarity coming right out of school playing with each other. They have familiarity, especially when you take guys in back-to-back classes like that and you continue to go to that well. Sometimes it takes rookies a little bit of time to learn their new teammates and figure out where they fit in. When they have experience playing with like half the defense at the pro level and they haven't even played a snap yet, that is a little bit of an advantage. I don't know how big of an advantage you want it to be, but it certainly does help. And it helps alleviate that barrier from college to the NFL.
Yeah, a lot of GMs draft in tandem. And what I mean, even if they don't draft a guy from the same school, they draft a guy in the first and the second round with the idea of them being in tandem. And then they tandem those guys with the guys they got last year. And so that's how you end up building it. You get like-minded people. Fisk and Verse out in the Rams. There was a whole segment where the Les Snead did the same thing. A little bit of love to Jalen Hurts here from Lou DiBiase, because Jalen Hurts certainly earned it. We'll talk about something he says here in just a second. I want y'all to hear it.
I've never seen somebody of this age with this much poise, this much resolve, this much ability to overcome adversity. He is so special in his own unique way. Like, yes, again, is he the style of player we're used to seeing at quarterback? Normally what we think means you're great? No, but greatness is greatness, and this is a different version of it. But also at the same time, like what we saw today inside the pocket, that is what you're used to seeing from quarterbacks. You got to give him his flowers. He looked like a franchise quarterback inside the pocket in the two biggest games of the year, in the NFC title and the Super Bowl. But again, the mobility, the leadership, the clutch play, the ability to overcome adversity, and the moment's just never too big for this guy. I mean, that's what makes Jalen Hurts truly great. And I think that's the NFL, like they're going to look themselves in the mirror when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks, like what is important and what's not. I think Jalen Hurts is completely changing the game.
I agree with him. And before I beat up on him a little bit, he said that Jalen, he has never seen, and Lewis is much younger than me. He said he has never seen. Well, I saw it twice. I saw Joe Montana and I saw Tom Brady. They're like in their second year and they're leading the team to Super Bowls. And they did it with that same poise. But to Lou's credit, there is something about that kid's ability to stay calm and compete and have this certain composure. Now, we've seen guys like Joe Burrow, and I think people misunderstood something that was said on this show yesterday, that if Joe Burrow wants to be considered the way Jalen Hurts now is, he has to win the way Jalen Hurts just did. But there are a lot of quarterbacks. I think Lamar Jackson, with all of his special effects, has the same quality. And that's why I get mad at people when they say he doesn't.
I think the way that NFL discourse has turned over the last, I don't even know how far you want to go back, 5, 10, 15, however many years it is. Championships have always meant something, right? That's why you play the game. It's to win championships, is to get to that top of the mountain. But I think that we are now eliminating greatness if people don't have championships. And I think the worst part of that conversation is eliminating greatness when people haven't even retired or haven't finished out their careers or aren't even on the back end of their careers yet. And we're already dismissing guys like Lamar and even to an extent Josh Allen and Joe Burrow as well. And Joe Burrow got to that Super Bowl. He ended up losing it to the Rams. But I think when you talk about the way that quarterbacks are talked about today, obviously Mahomes is in his own tier, in his own category, has 3 Super Bowls, and that just is what it is. But I think now the conversation, and I saw Robert Griffin III talking about this, I saw Ryan Clark talking about this, former players, is like, okay, well, while Jalen might not be the player that Lamar is, or that Josh Allen is, or that Joe Burrow is, he has done something that none of those 3 and none of anybody else has done. And that is to beat Patrick Mahomes in that Kansas City team. And I know that, again, it's not like Jalen Hurts was out there rushing the passer and making Mahomes' life miserable out there. He wasn't lining up and sacking Mahomes. But I thought Hurts had a great game. And I think the narrative that the Eagles defense was just carried Jalen Hurts is false. Mm-hmm. I think the Eagles defense had a great all-time historic performance. But the Chiefs sold out. We talked about this last week, didn't we, Wig? The Eagles and the Chiefs and what they needed to stop. The Eagles, they saw the Chiefs sell out to stop Saquon. And what did Jalen Hurts do? He delivered strike after strike after strike, only had a couple of mistakes in the game, and he had a great all-time performance. So Hurts is in a different category than Lamar and Burrow and Allen in the sense that he has a Super Bowl, but I don't think he's a better player than those guys. But again, in the way that quarterbacks are judged these days, people are going to talk about Hurts in a light of, okay, well, he won a championship and those other guys didn't, whether you think that's fair or not.
He made me a believer. He certainly made me a believer. And the Chiefs dared him to beat them. He said, bet, I got you covered. All right, we'll talk about what's next for the Chiefs here in segment number 2. First, we have to dissect it a little bit, and that's exactly what we're going to do with Peacock and Williamson before we hear from Chris Clark and the boys at Locked On Chiefs. So we'll discuss that and more here in the second segment of Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking for Jason Tatum to get more than 29 points. The best parts, PrizePicks is quick and easy, and you can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, segment 2 here in the barbershop. Tony Wiggins, the host, along with my man, KO. I call him KO because he's going to knock you out, my man, Kevin Ostrich. All right, look, we got to show some more love here to the Philadelphia Eagles at the top of this segment. But I wanted to just put it like this. We're going to eventually start getting to, there are a lot of people that's going to try to copycat Philly. There's a lot of people that don't have the things and the resources that Philly has put together. I think this team can make a magical run. I was just talking to you earlier off air about the fact that all year, and we know this from the notes that we've had to take before we do these shows, all of the talk was the Detroit Lions, and rightfully so. And if they were healthy, that would have been a hell of a game probably between them and Philadelphia, no disrespect to Washington, in the championship game. But Philly, because so much attention was being put on the NFC North, Philly was just sitting there building a monster right up underneath our nose. And that monster was the one that Kansas City could not overcome. Here's Peacock and Williams talking about the results of the game and what we have to look for moving forward.
10-0 Eagles. We've seen this before. We've seen it in Super Bowls. We've seen it in recent history for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not a big deal. 24-0. It starts to become, okay, the Chiefs cannot do anything against this Philadelphia Eagles football team. Wow, 40-22, and that does not tell the story about how thoroughly the Chiefs were defeated in Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me, hey, the Chiefs basically shut down Saquon Barkley, and That's one of the only things they did well. I mean, the defense actually played quite well, especially against the run. Yeah, they let up some explosives, and Hurts played well. We'll get to all that good stuff. But I'd be like, oh, they probably won by a touchdown or so. They probably controlled this game. Mahomes was picking them apart. Barkley couldn't go anywhere. Probably a lot of 3-and-outs for the Eagles. Total opposite. I mean, there was a long stretch there that Kansas City couldn't get a first down. I mean, just miserable stuff. And the purist in me loves it because the game is still shows that the games are super important in the trenches. That you can win championships by being the best team in the league on the both sides of the ball combined.
That's true. And that's something that, I'm a purist as well. And I'm glad that it kind of played out this way because now people can realize how important it is. But you got to be careful because I'll tell you what, it's easier said than done because Buffalo couldn't do as good as they are. They weren't able just 2 weeks ago. They weren't able to do what Philly did. You look at Houston with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. I think people would take those two ends over the two ends in Philly, right? But they weren't able to do it either. There's something about having the right mix of players and coordinators and then being on a mission to be able to get this stuff done.
I think Philly's depth, too, it's a testament to their depth because, like you mentioned, Wig, with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, it's like, okay, you have those two stars, but who's behind them? And we saw that it wasn't just, a guy like Josh Sweat or Brandon Graham or Jalen Carter. It was everybody getting involved. And so the thing with that Philly defense is almost everybody deserves to be double teamed, but you cannot double team them. Where it's like, yes, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, you don't double team them, they're going to have a problem. But what happens when you also can't double team the guy on the interior and that guy just beats you in a second year automatically in the backfield? So pass rush also, I think, is a product sometimes, not all the time, of the secondary and how those two are hand in hand. They're married together, pass rush and secondary. And so if you don't have a good secondary, well, your pass rush can't get to the quarterback because that ball's coming out and there are completions left and right. If your pass rush isn't good, your secondary, they can't cover for that long. It has to be a solid balance of things. And I think over the years, we've seen the Eagles and Howie Roseman invest in the defensive line a ton. And I know that's the big conversation of the week here, but it's not just that. It's about getting guys like Nakobe Dean in, who was another Georgia guy. It's about trading for Darius Slay. It's about being able to draft a guy like Kenyon Mitchell. He falls to you and you take advantage of that. So it's just calculated moves where it's not like one move wins you a Super Bowl. It's a bunch of moves combined. But I think Howie Roseman is always that aggressive general manager that says, hey, if we have a need, we're going to go out there and we're going to shoot for the stars with it. I know some people might think that's over aggressive, but I mean, Howie Roseman has the final last laugh here because he's the one that won the Super Bowl with that strategy.
That's right. A lot of people in South Florida too, players and media, cheered when Vic Fangio was when he left. And okay, who's laughing now? Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was y'all that needed to get fixed. Listen to we're gonna finally hear from Chris Clark with the Chiefs. What's next for Kansas City? Well, they ain't gonna fall off of a mountain, like I said, just because they got exposed. I guess that's the word that people are using. They got exposed by Philly. I just told you, Buffalo didn't do it the week before. The Texans didn't do it the week before that. I got a feeling there would have been a team that had been able to do it, but we'll get to them in segment 3. But listen to my man, Chris Clark.
Haven't had to do many of these this season. Chiefs drop the game. They lose 40-22 to the Philadelphia Eagles, a score that actually makes it look closer than the game really was. Kansas City allowed Mahomes to get sacked 6 different times. The problem is they allowed him to get sacked 6 times, and he wasn't blitzed once. This was one of the worst games that their offensive line has played, and one of the biggest stories that's going to be coming out of this and something that they're going to have to get figured out in the offseason is the offensive line. But it's also Andy Reid's decision not to make a change and not to go away from what had been working the past couple of weeks when it was obvious that Joe Thuney and Mike Callender were not going to be the answer at left guard and left tackle in this game. He had the opportunity to make a change, chose not to, and this is what happens with that game. Kansas City will be back in the Super Bowl in the future. I can just about guarantee that. But for right now, there will be much more on Locked On Chiefs soon.
Now, I don't blame him for saying that they're going to be back because it seems like they're always there. But I will tell you, that's why a lot of people don't like the Chiefs, because they just assume that they're going to automatically be back. And I'm looking right at you and you sitting there going, oh, really? Because you cover the Ravens. But I'm not going to put this all on the offensive line. Obviously, that was the biggest thing, right? We know that was the biggest thing. But when you start questioning a guy like Andy Reid, who's in the GOAT conversation about what he didn't do, you know what that tells me? He didn't do it because he knew it wouldn't work. He did the best that he absolutely could, and the best just wasn't good enough.
Sometimes you are just outmatched.
You saw it on his face. He was just sitting there looking like, damn. You know what I'm saying? You saw it. It's like, I'm telling you, Ostriker, I said halfway through the first quarter, it's about to get ugly.
Well, and I saw a bunch of tweets and posts on social media how Mahomes has always been down 10, and everybody's like, okay, well, now the game can start. The Chiefs are down 10, and I'm like, this is not that kind of feel. Because in those previous games, it's like, yeah, it felt close. Like, it's like, okay, Mahomes is down 10. Momentum hasn't shifted completely yet. There's still a shot he can come back, and obviously he had shown up in those moments and won Super Bowls off of it. This time, the Eagles, they punched the Chiefs in the mouth, then they punched them again, and they punched them again, and the Chiefs just did not get back up. And they were down from the jump, too. So, look, I said it at the beginning of the show here. I don't think that just because the Chiefs lost this game in this fashion, I don't think that means that all of a sudden, like, they're a wild card team from here on out. Like, they're still a very talented team. Their offense, though, when you look at this offense, it honestly is impressive how far they went this season. Obviously, Chris mentioned the offensive line issues they had, and I think those are honestly, I know Chris and Ryan, they know how bad that was, but nationally, I think that was underrated how bad the offensive line was, especially down the stretch. But also losing Rashee Rice was a huge deal, and they didn't have any middle of the field creator. DeAndre Hopkins is not the DeAndre Hopkins of the Houston prime days. Marquise Brown came back very late in the season. They didn't have that. Xavier Worthy was their guy, but they had to use him in a bunch of different roles. And he and Rice are going to be great next year. There are obviously going to be questions about Travis Kelce, but they need to fix their running game is the thing. Pacheco was injured for most of the season. Kareem Hunt is not a guy you want to rely on long-term. This is an awesome running back class. I expect the Chiefs to take one early and kind of make up for their Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick from a couple of years ago when they should have taken Dobbins or Jonathan Taylor. But it's the guarantee, and I get it because the Chiefs are a great team. They have earned that right by running through the AFC almost every single season. But Baltimore's hungry. Buffalo's hungry. Cincinnati's hungry. There are going to be other teams in that division like the Broncos and the Chargers. They're going to be hungry as well. I think it's going to be a much tighter race in the AFC where it's not just like, okay, everybody thinks Kansas City is going to win the conference and that's that. They might still win the conference, but I think it's going to be a much closer stack of the division and the conference of what we see moving forward.
No doubt about it. A look ahead. What do some teams need to do? I say they need to eat their vegetables. We'll mention the two teams that lost in the conference championship games and then two other teams that people expected to be in those games. We'll do that in just a second here on the third segment of Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you in part by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get it on than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets through the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love FanDuel, man. I love playing it, and you guys will enjoy it. Also, make sure you tap in to FanDuel, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, moving along here with Kevin Ostriker here with Locked On Ravens, and we're about to show the Ravens some love in just a second. But first, I want to hear from the two teams that did not win the championship. The first one I'm going to hear from is Joe Marino, but we ain't going to talk about the championship. We're going to talk about the MVP race. I did that for a reason because my man Kevin Ostriker here, my man Ostriker went on a tirade. He was like, man, no, it's Lamar Jackson. But listen to Joe Marino in what was a very, very good year for Josh Allen.
Be good, do good, God bless, and go Bills. The words that Josh Allen closed his acceptance speech with after being named NFL MVP. Let that sink in, folks. Josh Allen is the NFL MVP. and they got it right. I swelled with pride watching that go down on Thursday night. And look, I know we ultimately want a Super Bowl more than anything, and Josh Allen wants a Super Bowl more than anything, but this is pretty freaking cool. And it obviously puts an exclamation point on an incredible season for Josh Allen, but also his legacy and his story that is very much still being written. Josh Allen is an NFL MVP. The first Buffalo Bills player to do it since Thurman Thomas in 1991. The only other time it happened was O.J. Simpson in 1973.
All right, so back to the MVP talk. I guess there are people now saying you can talk about an individual trophy all you want, but the thing is you got to win the championship. There was somebody that left. I think they had Lamar Jackson fourth in the MVP race. They ought to have their ability to vote for that taken. This is not anti-Josh Allen. I'm all about, guys, being able to have the career years. And he had an MVP-worthy season. But Buffalo has some work to do. They got to be kicking themselves knowing that they thought they were probably good enough to beat the Chiefs, and they play the Chiefs, and the Chiefs edge them out in another close game. But then you see another team that is sort of, quote unquote, built like you and has the same mantra that you have with the same type of quarterback, just totally dismantle them. And does this tell you just how far Buffalo actually is from beating them, or was this just a one-off in your opinion?
I think that Buffalo's not far off from beating Kansas City. I think that we saw that in the championship game, and obviously some certain calls went some certain ways, and that had an impact on the game. I'm curious to know what the game would have looked like if Josh Allen had been awarded that short conversion. So I think that Buffalo, they don't have to go back to the drawing board and change everything up. Like, obviously, I think that they could stand to add a couple of playmakers for Josh on that offense. I mean, obviously, Josh had a great season, and the supporting cast that he had, when you compare it to like a Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, it was worse than those guys. So that would be good. But I think defensively, they really have to look there. The Bills defense, particularly in the run game, you could talk about some of the secondary members as well. And they don't have to go completely back there too, but maybe adding a pass rusher. I think looking at safety, they have to probably upgrade there. That would probably be the biggest need for them this offseason. So it's just a matter of trajectories, in my opinion, for all these contenders in the AFC, Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, Cincinnati, whatnot, where it feels like for the Chiefs, they can retool and get right back to where they were pretty easily. But then you're going to also have the teams on their tail, like Baltimore, Buffalo, and Cincinnati, that are going to also do their best to improve their roster. I think the most intriguing one of those three in terms of what their offseason could look like is probably Cincinnati. That's the biggest swing factor to me. Obviously, I think Baltimore and Buffalo, they have the opportunity to upgrade. Cincinnati, they might be losing some guys. So they have to decide how serious they are about it. But for Buffalo's sake, I don't think they're far off from beating Kansas City. I think we saw that in the championship game.
No doubt about it. Washington, this is going to be a little bit longer clip because David actually had some very, very good information, and I wanted you to hear all of it. Washington is an up-and-coming team. So before we even get to Detroit, we're going to talk about Washington because they're actually in the division with the Philadelphia Eagles, and they actually beat them this year, and they played them really, really tough. And we got to remember, Philly was one errant pass from Matthew Stafford away from maybe not even making it to this point. So sometimes it's about matchups. How does matchups affect Washington moving forward? Well, here's David Harrison.
After winning Super Bowl 59, the Philadelphia Eagles are at the top of the National Football League. NFL teams always want to look at who's the best team in our division, who's the defending, division champs, who are the contenders in the division, and how do we beat those teams? That's like the first step in evaluating your team. So when you're looking at the Washington Commanders in this case, the answer is the same of who do I have to beat to win my division? Who do I have to beat to win the Super Bowl? The answer essentially has become the same here because of this result. And that, of course, is the Philadelphia Eagles, who won the NFC East and then also end up winning the Super Bowl. So to beat them, sometimes you got to join them or at least be able to counter what it is they do. And you got to kind of respond to what it is those competitors do really well. So when a team is as good as the Philadelphia Eagles are and have been in the trenches, you got to try and match that energy, because when we look back at the three Philadelphia Eagles matchups between the Commanders and that team this year, you can clearly states that those really were the big areas of emphasis and where the Washington Commanders ultimately fell short of defeating the Philadelphia Eagles in 2 of those 3 opportunities was started up front, I should say. Stopping the Eagles still, to me, I believe, starts with stopping Saquon Barkley. The Kansas City Chiefs were able to do that a little bit more often, or a little bit better than most do, but they also have to be able to pass protect. That's something the Chiefs didn't do very well after that. And then once you get past all that, you've got to have receivers who can find space and coverage and win individual matchups, and you need to be able to defend against the deep ball, because the Eagles have shown, and Jalen Hurts certainly showed on the national stage in Super Bowl, that when you sell out to stop Saquon Barkley, if I still have time, I can hit some deep balls, hit some important passes to pick you apart.
All right, so I do believe that if Detroit had made it to the Super Bowl, the offensive line would have played much better with Penei Sewell. I also believe if Baltimore had made it to the Super Bowl to play against the Eagles, that not if Penei Sewell had played against the Eagles in the NFC Championship, and if Baltimore had made it further, they would have been better off against the Eagles in the Super Bowl too, because of their offense and the way that they play defense. But I will tell you this: the people in Washington, I was in the DMV for the game. They think they're getting Zach Bond and Myles Garrett. If they do that, Washington might have a chance to upset Philly in the NFC East.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right? Is like Washington exceeded all expectations this season, and they did it with a defense that probably shouldn't have been there, and a rookie quarterback that showed so much poise this year and exceeded his expectations too. But the thing with Washington is they have so much cap space this offseason and so much draft capital that they really can take any direction they want to. And I think that that's the big thing, where as opposed to some of the other contenders where like Baltimore doesn't have unlimited cap space, Buffalo doesn't have unlimited cap space, even, teams that were in the Super Bowl, Kansas City and Philly, unlimited cap space is not there. Washington, you have the foundation. Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, that is your offense. You can upgrade your offensive line. You can get some more pass catchers in there. Defensively, you can add some corners. You can add some pass rushers, at least some younger guys there, because obviously John Allen is a name. I think that everybody say, okay, Commanders, go trade John Allen on some picks for Myles Garrett. Maybe that could be it. But if they get Myles Garrett and Zach Bond, who, again, the career redemption for Zach Bond was absolutely unreal to watch.
Crazy.
If they can get some level, and it doesn't have to be those 2 players, but if they can get some level of 2 elite, best in the league guys like that Washington team is probably the NFC favorite. And it's nothing against Philadelphia, right? I don't think you can just dethrone the Super Bowl champ like that. But we also saw how tough Washington played Philly in the regular season, and I think that the championship game, maybe it was just too much at that time. I think that with poise, it could be the real reason why Washington could overtake Philly this year.
You're exactly right, bro. I think when I asked the question, did the Eagles save the NFL? I think about the 25-26 season, and now people are going, okay, you got a healthy Detroit team, you got Philadelphia, you still got Green Bay and Minnesota, and now you have Washington. And can the 49ers bounce back? And then you flip it over to the AFC, and it's like, well, Baltimore didn't go anywhere, and Buffalo didn't go anywhere, and it looks like the Texans can still get better, and the Broncos are coming. So now you got, instead of thinking that there's 1 or 2 teams that you have to look out for, there's like 8 or 9 teams that people are sitting there thinking has a good shot. You can have a shot every day here, man, to make sure you keep up on all things NFL with Locked On NFL twice a day. Tyler rolling early in the morning, hitting you with a double shot of espresso, and then me right here in the barbershop, Tony Wiggins, playing it cool, just poking around, poking the bear, and getting all up in people's business like we do here in the barbershop. All right, you guys take care. Hope you enjoyed the show. And make sure you tune in to Locked On NFL each and every day, wherever you get your podcast. Take care. We'll see you later.